Dr. Martes.
Maybe it's time for me to chime in.
Yes, please do.
Thanks. First of all, thank you, all of you, for your support. I did, when I talked to the school committee about this idea and this notion, I knew when I was going to be pension eligible, obviously. As Bev mentioned, it's pretty easy to figure out. You put in a certain number of years in public education in Massachusetts, and you hit a certain age, and you get to a point where you're eligible. Knowing that, and knowing that I continued to want to stay for a fourth year and even explore a fifth year, and I did say that to you, that I would explore some ideas and some options for a fifth year if that was possible. I thought the story would be really wants to continue to work here, reduce the town's appropriation or the school budget $40,000 so that he could stay. Certainly can, as you know, just by reading the numbers, I certainly can afford to do that. And I believe we have unfinished work. And this building is a very, very good example. I've mentioned frequently that one of the achievements that I'll always remember here is the overwhelming support in the community of a $20 million renovation to this school that desperately needed it during a time when we are and continue to be in a difficult economy. And people said, forge ahead. The parents who are here gave me advice. The school committee gave me advice. Forge ahead. This can be done. This community supports education. And so the other thing that I also knew is that I had structured a contract for a principal in Framingham when I was there. So in 2004, I worked with the retirement board and said, I would like to keep this high school principal, and is there a way that I can do that? And so they said, yeah, there is. He can retire, same kind of situation, birthday in August, and so he stayed. And then after that, two of my close friends and colleagues in neighboring communities did the same thing. I talked to John Moretti this morning, and he said, "Oh, Chris, I know you know I did this. I think I told you. I think actually I asked you how this can happen." So he did it in Mansfield in 2006-07. He is, and he said this. No, there was no discussion about it. I worked with the school committee on this, so that's pretty typical. And I also talked recently to Claire Jackson, who did it in another neighboring community in Sharon. And she happened to have an August birthday like I do. So this is not uncommon. Some of you probably remember that Dave Sweeney worked here on a couple of occasions in administrative roles. And I think you're right, Bruce. The whole notion of consultant, I think it has to do with the fact that I can do some consulting based on my negotiations with you a couple of years ago. And I'm able to do that. I'm able to do some work with some other organizations in education-related work, and that kind of stretches my thinking and my ideas. So I think the message, and obviously I was time-bound, just so that everyone knows, I was time-bound by the newspaper coming out. I did not want the staff to hear this or read this, somewhere else and not hear it from me. So I sent an email and explained in some detail about what I was trying to do, and continue to leave options open for some kind of work at the committee's discretion in year 5. I have probably exhausted a lot of avenues in terms of figuring out how to do that more full time, and I'm not that optimistic at this point, but still open to maybe learning something in the next few weeks. I know we're going to be at the school committee Superintendent Association conference, and there may be some possibilities, but as I've explored it over the last few months. The other thing that I know that became somewhat confused in this, and tonight is a really good example, and the last few days have been a great example. I chose not to make this public on the first day of school, as other superintendents have over the years, announced that they were retiring at the end of this school year, is because I felt that we needed to get off to a terrific start. We were worried whether we were going to open this building on time. And we didn't need that distraction that we've gone through the last couple of days. And because the school year is up and running, this information can go out. I've gotten a number of phone calls, emails, and face-to-face conversations with people, parents and staff, about one, sadness that they think that I may be leaving soon, relatively soon, and that they hope that the work continues. One of the things that we, and as I've mentioned many times, I use that a lot, what we've been able to do is change the culture in the school district. And so we wouldn't behave this way. I think that's the message that needs to get out. It wouldn't be acceptable for our staff to come with a story and create a rumor or do anything like that. That's the culture that was here. That's the culture that's not here anymore. And people have worked real hard to make sure that we're respectful to each other. And that doesn't mean we don't disagree. We disagree with each other. We have some heated discussions. But it's always in a respectful environment, because that, as others have said, we're role models here. We need to be better than this. And I believe that this community is better than this. So I think as good educators, there are lessons to be learned about what's happened in the last few days. We're going to move on. And one of the things that we are going to move on about is, what does a superintendent search process look like? I still think this is a terrific community to work in, and I'll be the biggest advocate for sharing that information with my colleagues. This school system has improved over the last few years and has the opportunity to continue to improve. But the behavior piece and how we treat each other is hugely important to how we want our children to behave and how we want our children to treat each other. So I think we can move forward. I think it's important for us to move forward. I think we've explained this in greater detail than any other of my colleagues have needed to explain this. I don't think anything was ever hidden. And actually, I continue to think it should have been a good news story. He's trying to stay as long as he possibly can. He certainly financially can accept pension payments because I've contributed to the system for so long. And I've contributed, as Bev mentioned, a healthy amount of money, 11%, for a good deal of my career. And as I tell people, and I've said this to the people at the retirement board, if I were disciplined enough at age 22 to know that I could save 11% of my gross salary for 35 years, I might be in Florida today. So this is something that I think became much more than it needed to be. I certainly agree with the committee. I agree with a lot of people that I've talked to in the community over the last few days. But this is a very good community. And we can move beyond this. Because I think because I think most of the people in the community actually believe what I think.
Okay.
Take turns.
Headed up first.
Take turns. Take turns.
All right, Bruce, please go ahead.
Well, I would just want to turn the conversation to the positive. Mm-hmm. We've all had a chance to have our say. Obviously, the stories of the last week hit a nerve. I think Dr. Martes has shown extreme professionalism through this. I appreciate the comments he just made. I think the way that we move forward and do the right thing for the kids in this town is to make this a blip on the radar.
Right.
If this thing spins up for another week with people who want to spin stories, that's going to be very telling to me. If this goes away, then it'll be yesterday's news, and we'll keep going on the good stuff I talked about and that we all talk about in our regular meetings. So that's my challenge to our community.
Thank you, Bruce. Martha?
My challenge to the community is for everyone who might be a naysayer or who has all this negative energy that they thrust around all the time, that if you could just take a pinch and make it positive, it would be incredible what you could accomplish for this system and for this town. And I think it's time for us to take it back, turn it around, and make us what we're supposed to be, good, decent human beings. And right now, it's certainly lacking. So I just ask you, please, turn your negatives into positive and move this forward.
Okay, well, I thank you, everyone, for your comments.
And Katie, just to close, I think at
Yeah.
the next meeting, we should begin a discussion about the search process. I know that right after that next meeting, a couple days after that next meeting, the Massachusetts Association of Schools Committees and School Superintendents Annual Conference comes up, where Glenn Kuchar and Tom Scott from the Superintendents Association are leading that conference. And so that would be a good time to engage them in some conversation about this. But we can start to frame what a search process looks like, and that having advised other districts when I was the head of the Superintendents Association, that can easily be accomplished within a good time frame. So I'm very confident. I'm very confident about that. But it would be good for all of you to engage in that discussion when you're at the conference. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good idea, and then we'll put it formally on the agenda so that we can have an open public discussion about it as well. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for everyone's input. And so let's get back to the business here at 8:05, October 1st enrollment. Dr. Martes.